this nightmare!
Episode 10. We are now on the last 3 episodes of the show. 3 episodes to find out who is behind the assassination attempt at the Autumn Festival, what the rot is and how to stop it, why the gang knowing about the healing water is so dangerous, and what the deal is with new magic. I would pretend to be excited about learning the answers, but we all know better by this point. We start episode 10 very strangely, as Rose is busy telling a scary story to some other characters during a sleepover, overlaid to footage of Time and Parsley in a spooky forest. It's very confusing, and when I watched this the first time, I thought the footage of Time and Parsley are supposed to be stand-ins for the characters Rose is describing, and it was going to be an episode where the characters all play roles as other characters in a fictional story like, I don't know, Sonic and the Black Knight or something. But no, Time and Parsley are actually out on a quest together while Rose tells a scary sleepover story, which is in no way connected to what the other two are doing. Amaryllis shows up and asks why they're telling stories at 2 PM in blinding daylight while rain pours heavily against the windows and a thunderclap punctuates her sentence. I was wondering if this was supposed to be a joke that didn't quite land correctly, but my hunch is that they actually did intend this episode to take place in the middle of the day when lines were being recorded, but then changed their minds when it came to storyboarding. So they tried to cover up this mistake by adding a thunderclap after Amaryllis says her line to make it look like a joke, even though the punchline delivery is extremely weak. Then again, I might be completely off base, and it's just another example of this show's inability to deliver jokes properly. But at this point, the poor writing is essentially gaslighting me, so I never know if I'm being an asshole for assuming the worst, or if I am completely on point and correct in my observations. Considering the title of this episode is Rainy Day Memories, I'm leaning towards it just being a bad joke, but my gut instinct is saying otherwise. I don't know. I wouldn't bother mentioning this, but it being right at the start of the episode along with the really weird opening, it's just kind of a double whammy of confusion. At the school, Sage is gloomily staring out the window, still sulking about the fight she had with Rose in the previous 2 episodes. I find it interesting that the last time we saw Rose, she was very sad about the fight while Sage was off palling around with Snapdragon. But in the direct next episode, Rose is busy having a slumber party and telling stories while Sage is the one brooding by herself. Oh wait, she's not by herself. She's within eyesight of Rose. So this is most likely performative. Got it. Also, Snapdragon is there too. Sage tries to get in a passive-aggressive dig at Rose trying to mend their relationship, but it doesn't work because Rose is too busy being confused as to why Sage and Snapdragon are now hanging out together.
Yup, that's what's happening. Gross, right?
Rose makes a big show of being independent and doing things by herself and stomps out.
I have stuff to do too, but unlike some people, I don't feel the need to announce it.
Oh, by the way, in case you're wondering, yes, this is what the majority of the episode is going to be like. If you were expecting any actual plot progression in the last 3 episodes of the story, then my condolences. Rose, followed by Amaryllis, run into Slime Boy and Parnell. I'm happy to report Slime Boy's mic and voice acting have not improved in the slightest.
I'm not good with names or faces, but your aura is always really red and dark, like old blood.
Amaryllis tries to rope Rose into some or other shenanigans regarding Sage and Snapdragon. Interestingly, she refers to Snap as her best friend here, which I'm not sure is what their dynamic was at the start of the show, but I can't tell if this is character growth or inconsistent writing. Anyway, back with Time and Parsley, who are at least slightly more engaged in the actual plot. Time has decided the only logical next step in the story is to summon a demon. Okay, so the absolute nonsense here is truly incredible. So Time wants to summon a demon so she can ask it to open a portal to her dad so she can tell him about the healing water so he can replicate the formula and save the fairy woods. You got all that? So here are my questions in numerical order because I can feel my life draining away as I try my best not to spend an hour on the first 6 minutes of the episode. Number 1. Why didn't she ask the ethics teacher to open a portal to her dad, since she has shown multiple times that she can do this? Number 2. Why is this healing water not a common knowledge thing, considering it was a basic test at the academy and the teachers didn't really act like it was that special a substance? Number 3. If guardians are tasked to protect the magical world, why have no guardians nor the academy been made aware of the fairy woods' situation? Number 4. If they have, why did nobody at the academy think of using the healing water? Number 5. Why doesn't Time tell her mom, who is already in town, about the healing water, since her mom is also trying to find a cure? Number 6. She's going to tell her dad, hey, there's this magic water that can heal things, as if the knowledge of the water merely existing would be enough for her dad to replicate it, as if the idea of creating a healing potion would never have occurred to him otherwise. Number 7. Even if she doesn't go to the ethics teacher, the teacher's present indicates that there should be other demonic creatures in town which could help her with a portal. Number 8. If demons can create portals like this, why isn't there some or other portal transportation system in place in this town? Number 9. Why doesn't the academy already have a stockpile of healing water if this is a common test that has been done multiple times before? Number 10. Why can't she ask one of the other students who completed the test for their water, even if it's not as strong as the kind they found in the diamond cavern, to send to her dad? Number 11.
Get on with it. Yes, get on with it!
Parsley thinks summoning a demon is a bad idea and suggests they go to the Triad for help. Because the show has no counter-argument to this plan, Time outright ignores Parsley and does the summoning ritual anyway. Enough of that though, we need to get back to the high school shenanigans of teenagers meddling in each other's love lives. Amaryllis is pissed because Snapdragon is something she considers as belonging to her in the friendship department. She's been written consistently as being very protective of Snapdragon being her henchman, but the previous episode ended with her purposefully giving Snap and Sage alone time together, so I'm having a hard time understanding what exactly her deal is here.
Because she has a new friend now, and Snap's such an amazing friend. He makes you look bad in comparison. Hey, I mean, it's not a contest, except it is. And guess who's losing?
I mean, she's right. Amaryllis' plan is to cast a spell that would display Snapdragon and Sage's most embarrassing memories to each other, so that they'd be horrified at each other's bad decisions in life. Rose is hesitant at first, but Amaryllis convinces her by pointing out that making Sage sad will give Rose a chance to slide in and give her a shoulder to cry on. Now, I would point out how truly horrible and awful this is to do to somebody, because it really is. But it doesn't bother me too much within the story, because Rose has rightfully been worried Amaryllis' solution to the situation was going to be murder. And also, because this is the level of not thinking things through that I expect from teenagers. Amaryllis even says that she expects Sage's embarrassing memory to be about something like wearing a bad-looking hat or being boring all the time. She's not expecting to expose something truly traumatic or anything like that. It's on the same level as stealing somebody's diary and reading pages to a friend to laugh about without realizing there could be honest, earth-shattering content in there. Amaryllis and Rose's plans here don't go any deeper than Snapdragon and Sage seeing a cringy TikTok about each other. But also, don't send people's cringy TikToks to their crush, please.
Fucking TikTok bullshitting bastards making me do stupid shit.
While Time and Parsley are waiting for the demon to show up, I guess, Time has a flashback to when she was an indeterminable few years younger living on Kashyyyk, and her dad was showing her how to use magic to help the trees grow, and lecturing her on how this is the charge of all elves, which opens up new questions as to why none of the other elves at the school know about the rot. And before you suggest that maybe Time is the only elf at school, but also, we then see the centaurs are also involved with trying to control the rot, and the show has shown us one of the unimportant teachers is a centaur. So basically, the more this show tries to explain, the deeper it digs itself into a hole. The demon shows up and we cut away to the school. I haven't really commented on this, but this show has a habit of cutting back and forth between separate situations before any scene really has enough time to develop. In my past videos, I've actually rearranged a few scenes so I can have enough material to talk about, because otherwise the majority of these videos would have me going, we cut to Time, who makes a circle of salt. We cut to Rose, who agrees to team up with Amaryllis. We cut to Time waiting for the demon to appear, and he does. We cut to Rose setting up the spell over and over again, and I'm actually trying my best to describe the events of this show in a way that is understandable. We cut back to Rose and Amaryllis setting up the memory spell while Slimeboy and Parnell watch. I don't actually know why they're here, I guess they had nothing better to do. Oh wait, Amaryllis says that if she has a bunch of, quote, uncorrupted souls nearby, there's a smaller chance of the spell going all evil. Meanwhile, Sage is doing her favorite thing when she's not with Rose, which is complaining about Rose. It's actually really funny to see the writers desperately try and cobble together a logical reason for why Sage is upset about Rose's behavior recently, when even if you took this show completely at its word, it sounds like nothing but gobbledygook to try and pave the way for when Snapdragon asks Sage if she's got a crush on Rose, which is the only real point of this conversation that the writers desperately wanted expressed, but didn't know how to lead the conversation there naturally, and so had to hastily construct dialogue between Sage and Snap to make him ask her this. Sage gets very flustered by the suggestion, but immediately asserts she can't think of Rose that way, followed by Snap and Sage engaging in more flirty behavior, including close-up of hands almost touching, and the rainwater against the window making the shape of a heart. This is all meta-communication by the show directly that although Sage might have a schoolgirl crush on Rose to some degree, these feelings don't run very deep, and her growing relationship with Snapdragon is instead the more concrete romance. Which makes it extremely confusing and overall a little pathetic when Rodriguez makes ship-baiting tweets going, "Will Rose and Sage end up as a couple? Tune in next season to find out!" Like, this is an episode of Victorious or whatever. Yes, I have been watching those reviews. Shipping as bait is honestly one of the absolute worst and most desperate attempts to hook an audience in my opinion. It shows that the creators have zero faith in the actual writing of the story and have to rely on clickbaiting the audience who doesn't care about things like writing and characters and only really have an interest in slapping Barbies made out of tropes together. Doesn't matter what the story, setting, narrative or characters are, it only matters which character is going to be making out with which other character. But only making out. Because anything more will have the very same people asking for this type of content reporting you to the FBI. We're only interested in sex, but it better not contain any sex. As for Rodriguez, this is fandom behavior that a creator really shouldn't be partaking in. My friend put it best when I asked her to check me that I'm not ranting about my personal feelings on shipping culture too much.
If all you can tease about in a tweet about the fantasy magical show with big bad evil is a ship, you clearly don't care about the story.
Also, I just want to point out this small little exchange because it says so much about the friendships in this show than any long paragraph from me could.
Sure do have a lot of feelings about Rosemary.
Of course I do. She's my best friend. Don't you have a lot of feelings about Amaryllis?
No, she's my best friend.
Snap also says that he and Amaryllis have a more father-daughter relationship, which is a weird analogy, as the writers further beg the audience not to ship them together, because a show dictating to its audience who is and is not appropriate to ship is not weird in controlling behavior at all. Also, Snap just casually mentions that Amaryllis has a crush on Hickory that she keeps denying, which is very weird since I'm not even sure who Hickory is. If anything, Amaryllis has been shown to possibly have a crush on Time, although it seems the writers have forgotten this detail by this point. I will point out one tiny thing I like though, and that's that Snap is drawn far less scowly here than he's been shown throughout the show so far, and it's actually nice to see him smile. If this show actually knew how to write characters, I'd say he's happy to be helping with someone else's problems because it takes his mind off of his own. Rose has changed her mind about the memory spell after giving Sage a sad look, which I can't tell if she overheard the conversation or not, and the spell goes off hitting her and Amaryllis. No, I don't know how Amaryllis setting off the spell with her wand is affected by the candle circle or Slimeboy and Parnell being close by.
Okay, yes, it looks bad. If anyone asks, it was just homework.
Meanwhile, Time is trying to get the demon to summon her father, which is not what she said she wanted to do originally, but the demon speaks in rhyme, essentially saying he's gonna wait out the timer so she can't talk to her dad, and that a plague is coming upon the land anyway and their days are numbered. and that Time and possibly her friends are going to die in which country. It's worded in a very cryptic way to fit the rhyming scheme, but that's the long and short of it. Time gets upset and breaks the salt circle of protection, causing the demon to attack. Time says she doesn't have a reversal spell because she didn't summon the demon to kill it, which just sounds like a lazy excuse to have an action scene. You'd think after Rose almost died in the diamond cavern that these characters would be better prepared for like bad situations and things. We cut back to the school where the group is running around trying to capture all the embarrassing memories in jars.
Parnell, if you tell anyone I vertically face planted because of how dreamy Leland is, I'll turn you into a lizard and keep you in a box in my room. Got it?
Threaten me with something that isn't one of my life goals.
Slime Boy jokes that chasing after memories is a lot easier than just apologizing. Rose points out that apologizing to Sage is difficult because she already puts up with a lot from her parents and Rose. This just sounds like Rose internalizing Sage's guilt tripping she likes to do, honestly. Meanwhile, this is happening. They catch the demon in a magically charged vine web, and Time executes the motherfucker.
Perhaps we can work out a...
No. Ice cold, man! Ice cold!
And that's it for the subplot.
You were right. This was a waste of time.
Meanwhile, back at the school, the group have caught all the memories and are catching their breath by talking about lizards, which is fairly relatable. However, before Amaryllis can leave to think of a new way to get Snapdragon back to hanging out with her, they notice one last memory of Rose is still running amok. The crying Rose memory runs into the room where Sage and Snapdragon are hanging out, leading Sage learning to her great surprise that the day Rose's mom left before she disappeared, Rose was sad about it. Rose apologizes to Sage for saying her interests are boring. Sage apologizes for blowing up at her, before going on to justify her actions by saying, "I've just been so stressed and confused lately, so you're not allowed to hold me accountable because I've got anxiety."
Boo!
As someone who also has anxiety, Sage, that might be an explanation, but it's not an excuse. Your feelings are valid because you can't control them, but how you decide to manage those feelings is your responsibility. Also, passive aggressiveness as a method to punish a friend is not an anxiety symptom I can say that I've ever experienced. Rose captures her sad memory and she and Sage make up. Mostly by Rose saying how horrible Sage's struggle sounds while her crying child self is sobbing its eyes out right next to them. Sage says definitively that Snapdragon is her friend now, and Rose says that her friendship with Amaryllis is still kind of a work in progress since Amaryllis is kind of evil. Snapdragon laughs at Amaryllis' emotional constipation and tells her that she doesn't have to be mean all the time and can scale it back now and then. Amaryllis offhandedly replies that she is who she is, just like him. Meanwhile, Time and Parsley go back to the academy. Meanwhile, Olive is hanging out in the school attic. The end. So what was actually covered in this episode? Rose and Sage became friends again. Rose reminded us that her mom is missing and that she's sad about it. And we learn Amaryllis has a pet tarantula. Time and Parsley are trying their best to pursue the plot, but nothing was accomplished. This was definitely a good use of the show's time in its final 3 episodes.
I hate this school.
Episode 11. The penultimate episode of High Guardian Spice, and this one's a real doozy. We start with a random assortment of students fighting a purple tentacle monster with a truly phoned-in design as part of the school test. A tentacle monster who first bleeds red, then bleeds purple, and is then revealed to be a robot.
Great teamwork. Nice use of violence.
Turns out this test was to choose a group of guardians to dispatch on a serious assignment. Naturally, the chosen students for the mission are the 4 girls along with Snapdragon and Cal. Amaryllis does not get to go along, much to her and my annoyance. The mission the group has been selected for is to answer a call for help from the Guardian Academy's sister school, which is specifically for mermaids. While on a mission to inspect changes to the reef near which country, the merfolk were attacked by a sea dragon which drove the group up a river. They have requested help to capture it alive as sea dragons are normally docile. So of course for this reason, the Guardian Academy is sending out 6 teenagers and 1 teacher to go help their underwater division of a school. But let's be fair, maybe there are just so many scattered missions and places that need help they couldn't save anyone else to send.
Hello, girl! Professor Redbud, are you on the mission?
Oh, no. My only mission today is soaking up sun and reading trash.
Anyway, as if you didn't see it coming the second their names were mentioned, Snapdragon and Cal get into a fight, where Caraway, in all his wisdom, decided to put the character he knows is having issues with the character he knows likes to bully people.
I just think you and the mermaids are gonna get along well.
Why?
Oh, come on. Like you don't remember gallivanting around the autumn processional? You loved making such a splash in your mermaid costume.
I'm confused. Is mermaid supposed to be an insult? Kel, I know you're trying to be the homophobic straw man, but if you really want the audience to hate you, you need to work on your insults, because pointing at somebody and going, haha, you're a mermaid, is not exactly the best read I've ever heard.
She's so gay, even her asshole has a lisp.
Cal does manage to get one jab in when he says Snap's dad must be proud to call Snap his daughter, which is enough for Snapdragon to be bothered. Snapdragon somehow manages to break his wrist against Cal's face and gets benched for the rest of this assignment. So anyone who wanted to see Snapdragon happy because he can actually live out his mermaid fantasy, I'm sorry to say Snapdragon doesn't get a cool mermaid form of any kind in this episode. Nor does he get to do anything to help the mermaid school.
Rosemary, I'll hold Flowering Thorn. You won't need her where you're going.
Well, that's not suspicious at all. Although no, this is not actually foreshadowing anything about Caraway. It's just a really weird, vaguely threatening line to explain why Rose won't have her sword on her this mission. Oh, but arrows are fine as underwater weapons. Alright. Anyway, getting back to Professor Redbud. She gives the girls each a ring and tells them that all they need to do to be able to visit the underwater school is to just add water.
Swing this way, we'll dance and we'll play. Now it's very easy, come on and just take a chance and shake a thing.
Let the music move you, you can do it!
Don't be shy, let the music inside and dance, dance, dance.
See, you can do it!
Most transformation sequences devote a sizable budget to them because the goal of a transformation sequence is to pad the running time of every episode, as well as act as marketing. It's a budgeting technique. Having a singular transformation sequence in only one episode means you're either going to have to sacrifice a lot of that episode's budget to make it look as good as you want it to, or you're going to end up with something pretty mid. High Guardian Spice went with the latter, mostly because I think they just wanted a transformation sequence and didn't consider the practicalities as far as production goes. So this is what we ended up with. I will give the mermaid forms one small compliment though. They gave Rosemary a white mermaid scheme. It looks much better than if they'd just given her a pink tail with pink accessories and called it a day. Time in blue also looks really good. It would have been just as easy to put her in green, but I really like the blue. I think of the 4, she has the best design.
What is it?
Nothing.
The girls meet up with one of the mermaids and are weirdly not too excited about this. Although granted, the mermaid is quick to tell them to stop having fun and follow her because it's not safe out in the open. She leads them to this place called the Bastion, right as the sea dragon attacks them. The mermaid acts as a diversion since the sea dragon would target her as it prefers real mermaids. Also, this is just a personal pet peeve, but I hate it in cartoons and especially anime when they get human actors to try and mimic animal sounds. I don't know why, but I always find it annoying. Is it just me? Is this just a me thing? It's probably just a me thing. Look, not everyone can be Frank Welker, unfortunately. The group get inside the bastion where the mermaid named Elodie introduces them to two other merfolk, Coral and Kelp. Time immediately crashes on Coral, and Coral introduces them to the pre-cure mascot, Bubbles. I'm confused by the bastion, however. I don't think they ever explain what it is. It's just this round fortress in the middle of this river. I don't expect them to give a deep explanation for every building this show visits, but it makes it doubly confusing when the majority of the conversation has been about the High Guardian Academy's sister school, and then we see this building underwater. The merfolk being driven up the river is so briefly mentioned in comparison to them mentioning the mermaid school so many times. You'd think this building should be the school, but it's not. It's a completely unrelated building that the three mermaids are hiding in. Back to the actual dialogue, the mermaids tell the group that the water dragon is well known to them and is somewhat of a pet. As before, he would enjoy getting pet and watching over the mermaids. This is also why it's so important for them not to hurt it. The mermaids are more interested in finding out what's gone wrong than just removing it as a threat. We cut back to Snapdragon and Caraway, and I'm just going to prepare you right now that a good chunk of this episode is back and forth dialogue between these two. Which is not necessarily a bad thing. I could make an argument that having dialogue like this in the B plot when the A plot involves mermaids and the water dragon is frustrating and a little whiplash inducing. However, as valid an argument as that is, I'm always the first person who argues that action sequences with moments to highlight characters or have breaks in the pace for character interactions is not only good, but oftentimes crucial to prevent me from spacing out when the show or movie becomes visual dubstep. So to complain that we're getting character moments in an episode promising action is not only hypocritical of me, but also goes against how I like my media to be presented. However, I will say I never had this problem in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Probably because those war scenes are comprised of smaller individual situations like destroying the wall or defending the gates. So it's not a singular event that you just need to wait out until the story can progress again. Someone else could argue against this and probably do so in a way to convince me that they're right, but it's not an argument I think would be authentic to how I enjoy my story presentation. The quality of the character interaction, on the other hand, now that I can criticize. Caraway is now saying that he needs Snap to act as Lookout, rather than he has been delegated as Lookout due to his injury. Now the story is,
I need you as Lookout. We all serve the mission in different ways.
Which is a good lesson if it weren't for the fact that the only reason Snapdragon is here is because he's injured, implying that if he wasn't, he'd be underwater too. Which undermines the each person has a role to play in a mission lesson, when it's very clear this is a downgrade. It feels very teacher being dismissive of the teenage students' feelings and using morality lessons as a cover. Although I did rewatch The Breakfast Club last night, so maybe this is just me. I will give Caraway credit here. He tells Snapdragon that the Triad's response to physical violence between students is suspension. But that he's giving Snapdragon another chance and wants to understand why Snapdragon reacted violently the way he did, since he's not a confrontational person by nature. Snapdragon refuses to answer, however, and Caraway drops it for now. We cut back to the school very briefly to show Cal. He bumps into Amaryllis, who is shocked to see him back so soon, and, seeing his beaten up face, becomes concerned if Snapdragon is okay. Cal grumbles that Snap broke his nose despite there not being any indication of this in the art, which shocks Amaryllis because she can't believe Snap would do something like that. Cal uses mermaid as an insult again, which I realize is also weird considering mermaids are an actual race in this show, but never is the mermaid insult treated as if it's racist. It's not a good insult, my dude. Take some notes.
After seeing you in drag, I realize now why Seattle has a high suicide rate.
Olive is here too. Back with Snapdragon and Caraway, Snapdragon complains that he feels like the only person getting punished for the fight. Caraway pulls the "I'll deal with Cal later, but for now I want to focus on you" thing you see way too much in children's cartoons. And I may not be a child, but I do want to ask show writers to stop doing this. When you have a little shit of a character provoke our main character into doing something wrong, don't respond to the main character asking why only they are getting punished with, "We'll deal with the other kid later," off screen, where the audience will never see it. It instills a feeling of injustice in the viewer who has the full context of the situation. And this makes the audience less likely to internalize the lesson you're trying to give. Because all the audience can think is, this is not fair. Not because they don't want the main character to answer for what they did wrong, but if the other person who provoked them is never seen to get punishment for their actions, and then have the authority figure not hand out equal punishment where the audience can see it, it just makes the audience feel angry and resistant to the message.
We'll deal with what she did.
Oh, will ya? It's been 22 years since I originally saw this episode, and I'm still waiting to see it!
This is not a High Guardian Spice problem, this is just a problem in general, and I really dislike it, and I have not met a single person who isn't annoyed and frustrated by this trope. Anyway, back to the show. We get a flashback to when Snapdragon was much younger. His older brother steals his pet rabbit and hits him, causing their dad to intervene. Snap's dad tries to teach Snapdragon that when somebody takes something away from you by force, you need to stand up for yourself. He does this by having Snapdragon tackle him to get his rabbit back. He praises Snapdragon and says he should spend more time sparring with his brother, as his dad has aspirations for him to become a warrior. So I understand the situation the show is trying to portray here. They want to show that Snapdragon comes from a family that's very toxically masculine. However, it doesn't really work for me in the way it wants to. I never get the impression that Snapdragon's dad is toxically masculine. His brother seems awful, as he not only hits Snap to steal from him, but also makes fun of him for crying like a girl. But Snap's dad is shown to intervene in the fight to break it up, and actually try and build confidence in Snapdragon, and teach him that there are times you need to be assertive to protect yourself. And when Snapdragon tackles him, he honestly praises Snap and comes across as encouraging. If they wanted to communicate that Snapdragon's father encourages responding with violence, they could have shown child Snapdragon punching him instead of tackling. A tackle is not necessarily an overly violent action, and is in fact a very basic form of play. Punching, however, is always a form of violence. The dad is also encouraging Snapdragon to be assertive in protecting what's his. If the show wanted us to better see the toxic masculinity of Snap's family, it would have been better to have the dad be disappointed by Snap crying, and unimpressed with Snap's attempt at punching him. You don't need the dad to be angry or mean or cartoonishly awful. The simple fact of having the dad be disappointed in who Snapdragon is would be far more effective, and wouldn't turn the dad into a one-dimensional straw man only there for us to hate. Actually, you know what? How to Train Your Dragon. You know Hiccup's dad? You know how Hiccup's dad is actually a good person at heart, and he truly loves his son, but is also disappointed that Hiccup is not the model of Viking masculinity, causing Hiccup to try and live up to his dad's expectations by acting violently, only to find himself unable to go against his true nature, and the movie ends with Hiccup and his dad learning to both better understand each other and how to communicate? That Stoic was wrong in trying to turn Hiccup into a brutish, violent warrior instead of accepting who he is, which hurt Hiccup more than it ever helped him by the end of the day, and that all Stoic really wants is for his son to be strong and able to take care of himself.
I knew what I was, what I had to become. Hiccup is not that boy.
You can't stop him, Stoic. You can only prepare him.
Yeah, How to Train Your Dragon does a much better job of showing a father figure whose idea of masculinity is destructive and have the audience understand his methods are wrong, while at the same time not turning Stoic into an abusive father who we hate. High Guardian Spice, on the other hand, shows a father figure trying to teach his small younger child how to stand up for themselves and not just roll over and cry, and we, the audience, is supposed to see this as wrong. Imagine if in High Guardian Spice, Snapdragon was AFAB, and this scene played out exactly the same. That her father taught her that she can't lie down and cry when someone hits her and tries to take away what's hers, and instead she needs to learn to stand up for herself. Literally not a single thing would change in the scene, and it would actually be touted as a very good moment of female empowerment. I get the meta the writers wanted here, they just didn't communicate it properly. They wanted to show that the reason Snapdragon injured another student is because his family has conditioned him to think responding with violence is a good thing. And the show would never want us to believe violence is a good thing.
That cave has barely swallowed up a bushel of kids.
Darling, if you die in there, I'm keeping your stuff.
Great teamwork. Nice use of violence.
But in softening Snapdragon's father into someone trying to teach his child to stand up for themselves when being bullied, and showing Snap's response be a far less violent tackle than a more aggressive punch, it doesn't communicate the father figure pressuring their child into a violent masculine role the way they wanted to. It makes Snap's dad look caring but misguided more than anything else. See, what they should have given us to truly illustrate how destructive a pressuring, toxically masculine father is Andrew's dad.
He's kind of skinny, weak. And I started thinking about my father and his attitudes about weakness. I mean, how do you apologize for something like that? God, I fucking hate him. You've got to be number one! I won't tolerate any losers in this family. Win! 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 You son of a bitch.
Anyway, back to High Guardian Spice. Sorry, I keep getting distracted wanting to talk about better stories. What follows is a pretty flimsy argument between Snap and Caraway. Snap says he hit Cal because Cal disrespected him. Caraway makes a leap in logic that Snap wanted Cal's respect, which is not the same thing as someone disrespecting you, but okay. And says that Snap got Cal's fear instead of his respect. Snap says that Caraway doesn't understand how he feels. Caraway counters that there are lots of ways to become a warrior. Do you see what I mean? This conversation just ping-pongs around flimsily constructed ideas of how a conversation should go, but at no point do any of these sentences actually flow together as a singular thought. It's just separate concepts loosely following each other. I've been using too many clips in this review so far, so just look up that scene where Megamind and Metro Man are talking about the expiry date of justice, and this conversation has about the same level of coherency. The gang are training, I guess, before they go off to hunt the sea dragon. Time and Coral do some more flirting, and Rosemary pitches a possible name for their team. Something she's only done once before in this entire show, but is now going to be treated as a running gag when we reach the finale. The plan is for every other mermaid to distract the dragon, and Rose will use Bubbles' venom to sedate it. We cut back to Caraway and Snapdragon, where the conversation is now about Snap changing courses, I guess. It doesn't matter. The point they want to get to is how Snap doesn't relate to his dad or brothers, and clumsily goes into how he hates big shoulders and wants smooth skin, and goes full on body dysmorphia, which is like, I'm sorry you're going through that, dude, but that doesn't really have anything to do with changing courses at school. But this is the part of the show writers actually want us to focus on. They just sucked at constructing dialogue leading up to this point naturally. Also, Snap mentioned the girls looked really cool as mermaids, and he wants that for him, so once again, I resent the showrunners for robbing Snap of the chance, so we could have this little talking head segment instead. Seems to me it would have been very easy to let Snapdragon also enjoy being a mermaid, and also have this little back and forth afterwards.
Do you know anything about transition magic?
Gee, I don't know, Caraway. Does it sound like Snapdragon knows about transition magic? Also, holy hell, you really couldn't think of a less on-the-nose name, could you? But then again, considering this show's idea of giving things fantasy names is just a word find and replace, maybe that's for the best. Snapdragon, do you know anything about shifting magic? I don't actually have a lot to say about the next few lines, as Snapdragon learns that trans people exist. Caraway gives some advice which I think is very useful, and not specifically regarding trans issues, but in a general world sense.
There are always more options than you think.
As someone who struggles with black and white thinking and who is trying to unlearn that habit, this is valuable advice, and I do like that the show doesn't flat out go, "Trans your gender, Snapdragon, it's the right thing to do," but instead just presents the possibility and moves on. But I want to talk about the general use of transsexuality in the show's universe after I've recapped this episode, so we'll get back to this in a few minutes. Back with the mermaids, they've left the safety of the Bastion to go to this underwater Greek pantheon looking place, which I'm now annoyed we don't get to see more mermaid stories involving submerged Greek and Roman structures. The real mermaids are going to draw the sea dragon closer, so Rose can throw the Precure mascot at it. The sea dragon just kind of bamfs out of nowhere and tries to eat Coral before they can actually do any of this plan, however. It does give Time a chance to protect her new girlfriend, and I feel the use of violence here is one of the few times it doesn't feel out of place or so hyperbolic I can't take it seriously. With the entire plan going tits up, Sage uses her terrosphere to bubble the group so they can retreat to the Bastion. With 2 mermaids being out of commission, this other mer guy gets bitten too, but he's a boy so he doesn't get any special focus. Elodie wants to act as bait for them to try again, since they don't want the sea dragon to go back out to sea to hunt the other mermaids. Sage suggests drawing it into the Bastion where they can fight it in an enclosed space instead. They do so, and both injured mermaids act as bait? Whatever. They close the door after the sea dragon gets inside. Rosemary is given the cue to stab it with the Precure mascot, but is instantly bonked on the head and fails. She's fine, by the way, which I only mentioned for the next part where the dragon tries to escape and Sage blasts the door to block it. I don't want people to think this is a desperate move on her part because Rose got hurt. She's doing this because she honestly thought this was a good idea. Elodie tells her magic is unstable, which, I mean, okay, if you say so. It seems to have been working fine in the episode so far, but then again, this is Sage. She says she's unable to stop and manages to completely vivisect the dragon in the process until Elodie grabs her staff away from her. Is Elodie one of the underwater students, or is she a teacher? I assume she's a teacher as she's drawn to look slightly older in the face and she's a little bit more adorned than the other 2 mermaids, and she is the one taking charge here. But the show never outright says she's a teacher. It makes me wonder why only the 4 girls were sent below water when this was the High Guardian Academy's literal sister school asking for help. Was Caraway supposed to come along to supervise and help as necessary, but he decided it was more important to waste time having another conversation about gender issues with Snapdragon when people are literally getting eaten? I'm not accusing him, I just genuinely don't know if he was supposed to go with or not, or if this is some dumb, you 4 teenagers have to pass this test to ensure graduating with guardianship thing. I am going to blame Redbud though, who could also have joined as a supervisor to help out the literal sister school, but was more interested in sunbathing. Although granted, if she went with, she might have teamed up with the sea dragon to eat the students. Anyway, back to Sage single-handedly murdering a dragon. Oh yeah, I wasn't joking, by the way. Sage kills the dragon. Yeah, good job, guys. Stellar supervision going on there. Caraway tries to heal the dragon while Redbud looks on ineffectively, but Sage was so brutal, he's unable to fix the wound. They say the dragon needs to be put down, and Rosemary adamantly volunteers despite literally 2 adults saying they'll do it. I have no idea why Rose does this. It's not to ease Sage's feelings in any way, since Sage just stands to one side and cries, and Rose doesn't acknowledge her at all during this moment until after she's done and hugs Sage for comfort. There are 2 certified adults and a 3rd possible adult here, and the 3 mermaids said they knew this dragon very well before it went berserk, so you'd think they would like to be part of this decision, but no. They just let Caraway decide what to do and sit a respectful distance away looking mildly sad about the situation. Sage is the only one really crying here, which, considering she killed it, is probably warranted, but the mermaids being a literal embodiment of "this is so sad, play Despacito" is both weird and boring. The only reason I could come up with on my own to do the writer's job for them is that Rose feels responsible after dropping the ball so bad when she literally had one job, but it's never brought up or mentioned or anything. She just steps up like, "No, I am the supposed protagonist of this mess, so there can be no other to put down the beloved pet of the mermaids which my best friend murdered." Like, that's literally it. That's the reason she has to put down the dragon, because she's the supposed protagonist. It's only here to try and give the woefully underdeveloped Rosemary some semblance of character development for the last remaining episode. But since she barely has a personality to begin with outside of Genki Girl trope who's sad about her mom disappearing, they had to manufacture this melodrama even if it didn't make much sense in universe. It's the kind of over-reliance on tropes that's rife in this show, and probably something a lot of less critical audience members wouldn't even think about, because the trope buttons being hit along the way like this makes it so that the audience members who just accept tropes because they are recognizable would never question why the main character is doing main character things. But if you're going to write a story with a defined main character who you want to be the core focus of your story, you can't have the fact that they are the central focus be the sole reason they're always the one to do things. In a good story, the reason why the main character is the one who does most of the important things is so naturally integrated into the plot we don't even think about it that much. Frodo is the one who takes the ring to Mordor because Frodo is the least likely person on Middle-earth Sauron would expect to wield its power. And if Frodo fails, then he's not going to do much damage on a global scale. He'll just become another Gollum. Aragorn leads the armies of Middle-earth because politically he is the rightful king of Gondor, and his bloodline inherently makes him the only person able to do things like enlist the help of the Ghost Army. He is the only one who can draw Sauron's attention as Isildur's bloodline. The reason Sailor Moon is always the one to purify the main bad guy of a season is because she is the person who wields the silver crystal. She is the only one who can. My favorite season has Sailor Moon and Sailor Uranus arguing with each other about when is murder justified, and who should mark themselves a murderer for the greater good, and where does that responsibility lie. Travis shoots Old Yeller because he was his dog. The reason the right choice in Mass Effect 3 is to mercy kill the Batarian refugee already dying from his injuries is because Shepard is the one who is responsible for killing everyone he loves. In Dragon Age Inquisition, the Inquisitor is not the person who mercy kills Cassandra's former apprentice. Cassandra is, because this is her responsibility. Rose has no responsibility here. The only responsibility she could possibly have is if she was taking the burden off of Sage, who would be tasked with finishing what she started or something. But the show doesn't frame it this way. Rose is not taking a burden away from anyone, as Redbud and Caraway even offer to do it and are very much insistent that this isn't Rose's job. The mermaids have literally nothing to say about the situation at all and are just silently watching everything, even though this involves them more than anyone. Anyway, Rose decides to kill the dragon, which she does. The friend group hug, and we end the story here for now before we cut back to Snapdragon to finish his plot. Although I guess in light of this episode I should be saying her, huh? I mean, the show doesn't actually provide a solid answer as to what Snapdragon will decide best represents them from here on out, but knowing the writing style of this show, I think using her is a safe bet. Amaryllis asks Snap if she's okay, since she's been really quiet, causing Snapdragon to, cry. Look, not to be an arsehole, but the cry acting is kind of uncomfortable. Not because it's unrealistic or anything, but crying as a voice actor is a very specific skill which I don't feel the voice actress fully achieved. Sage's crying is much better for comparison, but Snap gear shifting from talking normally to openly sobbing without the clutch gives me whiplash.
My wrist feels like it's on fire.
Snap breaks the weird crying by awkwardly in a deliberate way saying he likes Amaryllis's nails before nervously asking her if she'd still like Snapdragon if she started painting her nails too. And all cynicism and joking aside, I love this line of dialogue. It's such a shy, uncertain, and intimate admission without actually admitting to anything. It's trying to say something without being able to say it or even being sure what it is you're trying to say. And then to double up on this, instead of enthusiastically saying, "Of course," or anything like that, Amaryllis's response is perfectly in character by not even skipping a beat to reply she'd only accept Snapdragon painting her nails if she sticks to colors that actually flatter her.
Oh, beautiful.
Amaryllis then breaks her mask for a few seconds to tell Snap that she's always going to be there for her, even though she's not sure what Snap is struggling with. But whatever it is, it'll be okay. Amaryllis is the best character in the show. I know I keep saying this, but whereas in the past few videos it was more me just being very opinionated, here I mean it quite objectively. And she's not the best character for being trans inclusive, but because her having this unwavering loyalty to her best friend gives her complexity. She is introduced as the bitchy mean girl, and she never stops being the bitchy mean girl. She doesn't go through a massive character arc that changes her opinions or perspectives. It's just as the show goes on and puts her into more situations with different tones, we get to see different angles of her personality, while never losing or changing that original mean girl archetype. She more or less befriends the main group of girls, but it doesn't make her nicer. She just kind of stops being awful to them. Nor do we get a sob story on how she just wants to be loved and that her bitchy attitude is because her parents don't pay attention to her. When the idea is brought up in episode 6, she literally bursts out laughing at the very idea that she'd want to spend more time with either of them. She doesn't have the stereotypical neglected little rich girl angst, nor does she have a come to Jesus moment where she becomes nice through the power of friendship. She remains the horrible little gremlin she was introduced as. We just get to know her better as the show goes on. And she only changes in that she decides which people in her life fall into the person I give a shit category and who falls into the target practice category. As for Snapdragon, I haven't really commented on this show's sermonizing as a whole because for the most part the way it handles queer representation in media is mostly in the meta of the show. My only interest is whether the show holds up as a story on its own when you remove it from its meta, which was my goal from the start. But Snapdragon is the only real case of queer identity and the stigmatization of it as a narrative within the show itself. So I can't just not get into it as part of the story. When I watch a movie based on factual events in history, how accurate the film is to real-world records is a big part of how I tend to judge it. I know many people will say, who cares if something isn't historically accurate? It's a good story. And although I fully understand where they are coming from, and in some instances would even agree with them, a problem with movies basing themselves on real historical events is the audience who then takes the movie's version of events as being accurate to real life. Because they assume if you're making a big budget movie, you'd know what the hell you're talking about. Which is why I froth at the mouth when I see people watch the pure unhinged fantasy that is something like Apocalypto and go, wow, it's so crazy to think people really lived like this.
Cody, stop right there, mate. You're giving this movie way too much credit, mate. There's no point in trying to explain this scene. Mel Gibson doesn't care. He picks and chooses what he wants from history just so he can have a chase sequence in the jungle.
Oh, why would he do that?
Because he's fucking Mel Gibson, Cody!
So it would be hypocritical for me to ignore how well Snapdragon's story as a trans individual is presented in this show. The problem is the application of real-world facts is one thing, but the translation of a queer person's personal experience with trans issues is another. History facts only happen one way, filtered through perspective, but the individual human experience is virtually endless. On top of this, I'm not a trans person and have not experienced what being trans is like. So this is a double whammy here for me trying to judge how well the show pulled off this storyline. My only course of action is to look into what other trans people have said about this, and seeing as being trans is a unique experience to every individual, I have found people on complete opposite ends of the argument on whether this is well written or not. Some say they have never felt themselves presented on screen so accurately before and urge other trans people to watch it, whereas other trans people have very negative things to say about the way being trans is communicated here, and how it perpetuates being trans with eternal victimhood. However, I haven't come across anyone saying the trans representation is hateful or degrading. So I think the best comment I can give on its accuracy is, your mileage may vary. I feel there are much better representations of being trans in other media. Hannah from Tokyo Godfathers comes to mind first, as being a trans woman is directly tied to her character as well as the larger plot. And there are moments where she explains the trans experience both through her spoken word as well as visual storytelling. But Tokyo Godfathers is a feature film made by a master filmmaker with many years of experience, and High Guardian Spice is a cobbled together low budget first product by inexperienced show creators for a brand new division of an online streaming company. Too Long Didn't Read, it's not the best written representation, but it's not the worst thing ever either. What I can give my own criticism on, however, is how well the world building is done when you introduce transsexuality into the mix, and the answer is really badly.
Editing CPAP here. I realized I had already made this point in part 1 when the magic trans potion was first brought up, but honestly it bears repeating, so we're just gonna go over some of the same points, but that's because nothing's changed. These points are still relevant.
So, trans magic exists in this world. But the way it exists in this world is that Caraway himself has said he needs to take magic potion tea every fortnight or something in order for him to essentially remain physically male. The actual dynamics of the magic tea potion is never explained, nor is how the transition magic works. It's definitely not just an illusion and really is a transfiguration spell. But why does it require consistent reinforcing other than the show creators just wanted their magic fantasy character to literally need to take tea is beyond me. It's even weirder when you have repeatedly stated through all 11 episodes so far that new magic has no limits.
This new magic stuff, there is no cost. They can just do things.
Caraway fixes Lavender's sword when they were young, but needs to fix it again when Rose breaks it in the same place. Something that makes Rose feel better because it means she wasn't the one who actually broke the sword. To do this, Caraway uses old magic since he needs to make this glyph to do so. So the spell on the sword needed to be reinforced after some time after Rose dropped it. But why didn't he just use new magic?
With new magic, you can do anything!
And don't tell me it's because the show implies new magic is bad in the long run, because the entire High Guardian Academy is based around teaching its students new magic. That's why Sage is having such a hard time. The Academy only teaches new magic, which has no limit. So why did Caraway need old magic to fix Rose's sword a second time, and why is a magic tea potion something that needs to be taken regularly when new magic has no limit? In episode 2, Redbot starts turning her students into animals and plants for no reason other than to force them to make an antidote potion as quick as possible before the transformations are presumably permanent. The transformations wouldn't wear off on their own. Sage has to make an antidote for it. Neppy Cat is constantly turning himself into a furry version and only turns back into a regular cat after they sedate and undo the potion he drinks for it. It doesn't wear off. In this very episode, they have a magic ring that they only have to wear to turn into mermaids, and the only thing they need to do for it is to literally add water.
Just add water!
So why can't you just use the exact same established magic to permanently trans your gender? And because transfiguration is shown multiple times throughout the show as being so easy that children can do it, why is the concept of being a transsexual person so weird and foreign that Snapdragon never even knew that could be possible? Her whole thing in the past 3 episodes was that she wants to be a mermaid. Did the idea that she wanted to present as a girl never even once cross her mind while she's attending a magic school? The same school where Amaryllis is happily messing around with magic for her own selfish desires? You're telling me that this little gremlin, who is your best friend, wouldn't immediately be on board with the idea of you even just playing with the concept of turning into a girl for a day or something? Hello? Why, it's YouTube commenter Chaos1X. Hello there, YouTube commenter Chaos1X. What have you come to talk about today?
Why is Snapdragon dressed as a mermaid in the first place?
From a narrative perspective, I can't think of a reason that doesn't completely render his entire trans arc as being impossible to have occurred in the way the writers wanted it to. First, he and Amaryllis show up and it seems like, oh, she bullied him into that, but on closer inspection, that doesn't seem to be the case, despite the writer trying to pull a backdoor drama on them like they did with Rose and Sage. So, he was doing stuff like this before and Amaryllis is cool with it. But that didn't make sense, seeing how the whole Cal thing shook out, particularly when Snap's brooding and Amma just doesn't seem to understand why he's so bothered by Cal's comments, and then comes the scene at the end of the episode where he and Caraway talk, so playing with gender identity being a thing goes out the window. He sure as hell isn't experimenting with his sexuality or identity in episode 9. That's not even considered a thing until Caraway tells him it's a thing in the next episode. Nor would he brazenly do so in public where, again, Cal's reaction tells us men don't normally go around impersonating women.
You know what? You're right! Snapdragon doesn't even think about her possibly being a different gender, as she constantly throughout the show tries to live up to the masculine figure her father and brother had set out for her. The very concept of possibly presenting female never even crosses her mind. So why is she dressing as a mermaid in episode 8 and 9? Amaryllis didn't force her into it. Cal acts like he's never seen a boy dressed as a girl before, despite his literal blood family cousin Pernell being non-binary. So why is Snapdragon dressed as a mermaid here? Because he wants to be a pretty mermaid. But then why is she to live up to her father and brother's idea of what masculine is, to the point she doesn't want to give up her father's act because she doesn't want to disappoint him? She never even thinks about playing with her gender until Caraway lets her know that that's even a thing in this episode. Are you telling me that in a magic setting with a magic system that has zero drawbacks, there aren't a bunch of people who would happily not only transition, but who would also transmogrify themselves into younger versions of themselves, or different species, or furries? Has Snapdragon really never seen a single person do this before? And she asks this nervous question if Amaryllis would still like her if she did something like paint her nails, when she was dressed like this in a previous episode and Amaryllis puffed her up about it. I'm not surprised anymore that this show has no interest in any logical form of world building, even on the most surface of levels. But I am genuinely astonished that this show didn't do any world building on the issues it seems to care about the most.
Just add.
Oh lord, we're not even done. We have to cut back to the friend group. I thought we were finished with the storyline this episode. You cut away from it in a very much implying way that we were done. Anyway, Sage is crying because she killed the sea dragon and how she couldn't control her magic.
It's not your fault, Sage.
No, it isn't. It's your fault as teachers who failed to instruct her properly to prevent her magic going haywire, which you just admitted is a common problem, and then sent her on this dangerous quest without any supervision. Time finds a random piece of seaweed on the dragon and confirms that the rot is what drove it crazy. She just says this in front of all the teachers, by the way. So much for not telling them about everything they know or whatever. Not that that leads to anything, because the only thing Caraway has to say about this is that nature being unbalanced is bad. Which is where the episode cuts to credits. This episode is so miserable to watch. I genuinely had a hard time getting through it again to write this part of the script, so I'm just gonna move on. Episode 12. So here we are. The final episode of High Guardian Spice. The season finale. The climax to the story. We open in the Everfree Forest where Olive is meeting our new main bad guy henchman. Yes, we're introducing the main bad guy henchman in the finale. He's only been here in the intro sequence of every single episode so far. His name is Mandrake, which is actually a good name in a show where everyone's named after plants. And he establishes his evilness in a rather heavy-handed way by asking if he can break Kino's neck, and then saying he's surprised the tribunal haven't killed Olive yet. I mean, when you introduce your main villain henchman in the finale, you're gonna have to go into overtime trying to establish him as a bad guy, I guess. Olive is surprised that Mandrake is gonna be giving her orders, which is weird since I'm pretty sure episode 9 ends with the flame guy telling her the tribunal is sending someone to give her orders. Back at the academy, Rose is still feeling pretty bad about the sea dragon. I find this part really weird from a writing standpoint. Not the feeling bad part, but why is Rose the one who is shown to be feeling the worst, with Sage having to ask her if she's still thinking about the sea dragon? Rose was the one who inexplicably decided to put it down, but considering Sage is the one who outright murdered it by accident, you'd think she should be the one stuck in her head about it. But apparently she's already moved on and is only sad about it in a general, "Wow, that sure was a messed up thing that happened, huh?" way, and not as the very person who killed a dragon in a really graphic and violent way in front of its friends. My guess is this is another case of Rosemary is supposedly the protagonist because we say so. So she's the one who is supposed to be feeling angsty emotions so that the rest of the cast can react to it, without actually thinking they're writing through and realizing that this makes it seem like Sage is a psychopath. See, this is why when you write from the general down to the specific. Because if you start with the smaller details and tropes without pulling back and looking at the larger picture, you get this. Sage accidentally kills a brainwashed dragon in a very violent and bloody way, failing the mission. With no way to cure its wounds, Rosemary puts the dragon down. The next day, Sage tries her best to cheer up Rosemary and make her feel better. You see how this doesn't make sense? I mean, yeah, you didn't need me to dumb it down to understand what I'm getting at, but then at the same time, how the hell did the writers not see the problem?
Cheer up, Rosemary. I'm sorry you feel bad about the dragon I killed, but it'll be okay. Let's go cloud watching together.
Meanwhile, Olive points out Rosemary and Sage to Mandrake, who is dead set on just killing them. Olive says she has a better plan of luring Rosemary to which country, using her mother as bait. When Mandrake is confused about this, Olive points out Rose's mother is Lavender, much to Mandrake's amusement. I'm just gonna come out and say it, but Mandrake is another one of those Western anime bad guy characters that was created by people who only watched Sailor Moon and didn't get any deeper understanding of the villains beyond they're gay. So they can't even parody Sailor Moon in an interesting way. So all you end up with is a villain who is constantly saying nothing but "I'm gonna kill the main characters" over and over again, wrapped up in a derivative character design. It reminds me of that one terrible episode of Dexter's Lab after it switched studios, where an alien kidnaps Dee Dee and her imaginary friend, and he's drawn like this for reasons that'll forever escape me. I would say Mandrake is more a Precure villain than Sailor Moon one, but I don't think these show creators would have much knowledge about Precure. Let's face it, this is exactly the kind of show made by people who watched the dick dub of Sailor Moon when they were kids and never did any further design research.
He is the most totally pompous, arrogant blowhard. I mean, who does he think he is, and why'd I ever think I liked him? We have nothing in common. Nothing at all.
Hell, even if you only watched the dick dub of Sailor Moon, I would at least expect you to have seen the R movie. How did you watch Fiore's story and your only takeaway from it was, "Oh my god, this guy is evil and gay"? This is why they give kids reading comprehension tests in school.
He threw a flower at me.
Back with Rose, while she's being sad about the dragon Sage killed, her mom appears out of nowhere and leads her down a dark stairway. You don't win any prizes for guessing this is Mandrake, who is a shapeshifter. When did Double Trouble show up in She-Ra again? Interesting. Rose is momentarily happy and confused to see her mother, who disappeared and she has been sad about for 11 episodes, but this is quickly brushed aside since the show knows we know this can't be her real mom. So we skip over the entire emotional reunion so that Not Lavender can tell Rose not to tell any of her friends that she's back, because there are enemies at the school. Something the main cast themselves have already stated in a previous episode. And for Rose to tell Not Lavender what they know about the rot. Rose rattles off a brief summary of all the plot we have gotten so far, most of which only showed up in episodes 8 and 9, while creepy music box music plays in the background.
Yeah, your best friend, Caraway. I saw him writing about it in his journal. And, well, who knows who else he told?
Wait, when was this? When did this happen? Last I was aware, Caraway is never shown to know anything about the rot at all, despite Time mentioning it in front of him in the last episode. But Redbud was there too, as were the mermaids. So when did this happen? Was this some throwaway scene in the previous episode that I just missed or something? I'm not watching the show a fifth time to find out, because I am just as sure this never actually happened and they had to hastily pencil this plot detail in because they realized they were at the finale and barely any plot progression has happened while we wasted time with slumber parties and truth or dare. Anyway, the second Rose mentions Caraway also knows about the rot and that Caraway might have told other teachers, not Lavender disappears. I don't know why, considering Mandrake has repeatedly stated that he's only here to murder the students who know about the rot, and he was literally just about to do so. My guess is the writers wanted this fake out reunion, but did not know how to not have Mandrake just murder Rose then and there and be done with it. So they had to find some justification for him to stop. It didn't really work though, because there's no reason he couldn't just finish the job here and, I don't know, blame Redbud or something. She's only one bad day away from wiping out an entire class already. Rose goes back to her dorm where Sage asks her if she's gotten over Sage killing the dragon yet.
I saw my mom!
Good job with that secret, Rose. The group figure, not Lavender, has probably gone to see Caraway, and you don't win any points for guessing Caraway is now also Mandrake in disguise.
Oh, girls, to what do I owe the pleasure?
Subtle. The real Caraway enters the room and doesn't even so much as blink before just body slamming his doppelganger, which is way funnier than it should be for some reason. Rose actually uses information we learned in episode 3 to determine which Caraway is the real one, so kudos to the writer for actually looking over what they've previously written. This isn't impressive or anything, it's just more than I expected at this stage. Although the truth is, they probably only did this to create the illusion that they had some plan at the beginning of the show, rather than just writing the finale and throwing in some callbacks. Mandrake turns his staff into Link's energy sword and just blasts Rose. Before he can deal any real damage to the group, Caraway forms a shield with one hand while drawing up a rune with his other, which catches Sage's attention. Apparently this rune was to power up his staff so he can blast Mandrake, but that doesn't make much sense to me because Sage, who sucks at new magic, could vivisect an entire ass dragon just using her normal staff without all that rune nonsense. And before you think maybe the rune was to nerf the blast so Caraway doesn't turn Mandrake into chunky salsa, the blast he does fire is enough to throw Mandrake right out the window to the pavilion grounds like 3 stories below. So this little rune flourish here is only done so that Sage can notice it.
You used old and new magic together!
A solid foundation in old magic gives one the potential to merge their strengths. A skill you'll learn in time.
Why was this never mentioned before? So you're telling me that this entire show has been Sage whining and crying and complaining and angsting and accidentally killing dragons because she can't do new magic because she's only used to old magic, while all the teachers tell her how old magic is dumb because new magic allows you to do anything.
With new magic, you can do anything.
You're telling me all of this, every single moment of it, was all bullshit because this entire time Caraway was aware that old magic can be used as a foundation for new magic. And all this time, you have Sage, who is constantly vocal about only knowing old magic and who constantly asks these very same teachers if she can use old magic instead of new magic, and who is constantly told by the teachers that new magic is better and she needs to learn how to use it. You're telling me that at no point in this entire show, Caraway has never once thought it might be a good idea to mention, even once, that old magic can be used as a foundation for new magic and Sage will learn to combine them later? Are you absolutely kidding me right now? How does this make sense? How does any of this make sense? And don't tell me this is some secret that she was going to learn in her 2nd or 3rd year or whatever. Caraway just casually mentions it here. And even if this was the case, why in the absolute fuck would every teacher drill it into their students' head that new magic is better if they're going to combine both magics later?
New magic is better.
Why aren't the students learning old magic first if it's a foundation to new magic? Why didn't you build the foundations of your story before focusing on the details? Every time, I think this show cannot get any lower when it comes to literal, basic, bare writing ability. It whips out the pickaxe and starts digging. I'm so livid. I don't even know how to properly explain why this is so awful in a constructed and thought out way, because all I want to do is scream.
Every bone in my body is quaking with intense rage right now.
Caraway tells the girls to sit tight while he gathers the other teachers. He specifically tells them not to engage with this shapeshifter, nor are they to inform the other students and cause a panic. Honestly, both very good points. So of course the very next line of dialogue is Rose saying to Sage that it was probably not her real mom she spoke to, and Rose is sad about this. So she decides to find Mandrake themselves. Yeah, she kind of just assumes the others are gonna agree with her, which they do. Meanwhile, Mandrake has called the 5 teachers of the school together under the guise of a poker game and puts them all to sleep. Or rather, Olive puts them to sleep. Edgelord over here just wanted to murder them all. And it's at this point where I stopped taking this character seriously as a villain. He is so murder happy while also being pissy and constantly complaining about not killing people that he has stopped being an actual threat and mostly just sounds like a try-hard edgelord. Also, apparently between a single cut, Olive has somehow captured Caraway as well. The gang are trying to figure out who Mandrake could be when they hear him pretending to be Caraway call all the students to a mandatory assembly. The gang realize this is Mandrake as soon as they hear this because he just told them not to tell anyone. Or rather, Rose figures it out because this is the final episode and she's supposed to now be a badass who has grown from being an airhead to a more tempered warrior after putting down the dragon sage killed. Too bad the show did not write her as slowly maturing across the multiple opportunities it had and just had her instantly switch from a different personality in the finale. I feel this is the result of only understanding creative writing from the point of taking tropes and popular set pieces within stories and fanfics you like, and then shuffling them around and thinking that if you slot the correct trope into the correct position, you'll have succeeded in this thing called story. The writers want Rose to be this energetic but not very bright main character, and because that is the character that Rodriguez likes her to be, this is the character role she inhabits throughout the show. But the show writers also understand that a character like this should mature and become more capable by the end of the story. However, since Rodriguez has Rose be a very one-dimensional trope that he likes, he keeps her in this role, and then in the final episode, she's written as if she suddenly gained all this maturity and competence from experience, when at no point within the show itself was she shown as slowly gaining this maturity, because the show does not want her to have this middle period of growth. It just wants her to be either the energetic airhead or the matured warrior. How do I explain this? You have Rose is my OC. She's basically a self-insert, but not enough to just be an honest self-insert. She's an OC with a character bio illustration as the only depth given to her personality. This show is about her and her friends having wacky, non-specific adventures together. Now it's the final episode. In the final episode, the main hero of a story who started out as immature and not too bright has had experiences and been through situations where they are smarter and more capable and more emotionally developed than at the start of the story. This is how a main character is supposed to be written when you get to this point in your plot. Now put these two concepts together. I feel this is what you get when you are a creator online who is used to operating within the culture of fandom and OCs, and then try and apply those kinds of creative techniques to a professionally written narrative. That's not to say that you can't make a show about an OC, but rather, when your understanding of story writing is only based on answering headcanon asks about your OC, and your interest in media does not extend beyond shipping and TV tropes, you do not have the skills to craft a functional narrative. You can't just go, I have OCs, I have TV tropes, and I have this line graph of where to slot in the important plot points. I can write an entire show using these. If you want to write a functional story with a cohesive narrative, regardless of whether you're writing an episode-by-episode story or a long-form plot, you cannot skip over the part of learning how creative writing works. And fandom interaction, Tumblr asks, and OC bio sheets on their own will never be a replacement for understanding the foundations of writing both stories as well as characters.
I'm constantly texting, and there's no one at the other end. I'm just a grown man who can't even look his own friends in the eye for too long because I'm afraid that they'll see that I am broken.
Some people have an innate understanding of narrative, and these people tend to hone that natural ability through, actually writing. Whether original fiction or long-form fan fiction. And I'm not talking self-indulgent ficlets and single-chapter meet-cute imagines, I'm talking about multi-chapter plot-driven stuff. But unless you're somebody who is a prose writer by their very nature, you need at least some education in how writing works, beyond just sharing your headcanons on social media if you plan to do this professionally. Because if you try to rely on tropes to fill in the blanks of your story so you have a frame structure to hang shipping and jokes on, you're going to end up with a one-dimensional character like Rosemary. Anyway, Mandrake asks Amaryllis if this is all the students in the smithy before he locks them in with the comatose teachers. When Olive asks him what he plans to do next, he tells her he's going to frame this as a spell gone wrong and set the school on fire. Which isn't the worst idea I've heard. He could kill off the main characters one by one, but not knowing which teachers know about the poorly explained witch country thing kind of messes things up. I do, however, think this is messy. The smarter thing to do would be to have Mandrake and Olive infiltrate the school and slowly learn how much everyone knows over a few days, and then make their move. You could almost have them both be reoccurring villains throughout the season, and structure episodes of the day around their shenanigans, varying them in terms of threat level. Some episodes could be goofy, and some episodes could be more serious. But since we introduced Olive in episode 7 and Mandrake in the finale, the characters have no time to make plans or learn anything, as they're pressed for time to do something dramatic, so we can have an action-filled finale, which we need for some reason. Oh, and also we still need to give Olive her blatantly telegraphed face turn. So when she hears Mandrake is going to set the school on fire and kill everyone, she points out the main characters weren't with the other students, and they run off to lure them into the library so we can have a cool setting for a fight. The gang spot Mandrake and Olive, and Mandrake puts a shield around the whole school before taunting them to come face him in the burning library. When they arrive, they attack Mandrake, but he pulls out his daggers and deflects the arrows before he and Olive split up. Rose, who is now a competent leader, tells Sage and Parsley to put out the fire while she and Time follow the duo. Rose calls out to Olive, telling her that last time they spoke, Olive told her to come with her to Witch Country. Rose says she's willing to go with her if Olive and Mandrake stop any unnecessary killing. Olive jumps on the idea and tries to reason with Mandrake, but he's too dead set on murdering everyone. He uses his abilities to confuse Rose and Time by shape-shifting back and forth while attacking them. Eventually, he manages to take Time hostage, and Olive jumps in, asking if she can be the one to kill Time. Because Mandrake is an idiot, he fully buys that Olive is suddenly okay with murder despite her spending every second begging him not to kill anyone, and gives her his dagger, which Olive promptly shoves into his gut. So I guess she was okay with murder after all. Parsley and Sage jump back into the fight after putting out the fire, only to have Mandrake disappear in a burst of flame, setting everything ablaze again. Olive tells the gang that she was sent to observe them, and when the orders changed to kill them, she couldn't go through with it. The others decide to trust her for now. The group track down where Mandrake had run off to and engage in combat again, this time with everyone. Also, I just want everyone to know that this fight scene includes an epic battle theme version of Scarborough Fair. I don't have anything really to say about this, I just wanted you to be aware of it. The students inside the smithy are confused, and Cal is freaking out because he's claustrophobic. Amaryllis and Snapdragon notice that Caraway is lying passed out on the table, despite Caraway being the person who locked them in. They both quickly realize Olive is probably behind this because Amaryllis and Snap are actually smart. Amaryllis casts a spell that boosts her voice, with this really cool visual of her bracelet wand turning into a choker with a waveform on it, which I really like. She quickly divides the students up into new magic users to blow a hole in the floor, non-magic users to grab the teachers and be ready to carry them out, and old magic users to use their shields and wards to contain the smoke. Yes, apparently Sage isn't the only old magic user at the school, but I'm past discussing this plot point by now. Meanwhile, Mandrake pulls out a broom and escapes through the roof. Olive chases after him, with Rose and Sage not far behind. After a short sky battle between the four of them, during which the school gets even more fire literally thrown at it, Mandrake slams two terraspheres together, causing an explosion which sends everyone flying. Rose is clinging from the gutter, while Sage has managed to get her hair trapped by some falling debris. She uses a dagger she had on her to cut her braid off so she can rescue Rose. I do like that this show took the effort to draw Sage with short hair very choppy and uneven after just cutting it. Almost every other show I've seen where a character gets their long hair abruptly cut, it's immediately in a nicely styled fashion. I really appreciate going the extra length to give Sage a brief design of having her cut hair be uneven and messy like this. Anyway, Mandrake has focused his attention on Olive while this is going on, destroying her staff and chasing her off the roof. But before he can kill her, Rose and Sage intervene. He tries to turn into Lavender to psych Rose out, but she's not having it. The bean in a salad bowl that is Sage's brain rattles in the correct position for her to remember the rage-inducing detail that you can combine old and new magic together through inexplicable means, and she uses her Terrasphere to draw some runes and blast the ever-loving fuck out of Mandrake, causing the shield around the school to shatter. Why she needed to do this when last episode... oh, who cares? It's too late though, as the entire academy goes up in flame despite the presence of modern-day firefighters who don't use magic putting out the blaze. In the ensuing chaos, Mandrake manages to escape, while Olive is... arrested, I think, as the characters watch the High Guardian Academy burn itself down. We cut to a little while later, where Rose and Sage are sitting below a tree and unpacking everything they've just gone through. Rose uses her enormous double-handed claymore to cut Sage's short hair into something a little nicer, while the two of them go back and forth with, "You're so great, no you're so great, no you're so great," before we get to see all the girls leave the burnt-out ruins of the academy to go on winter vacation. Before they leave, the two best characters in the show come to see them off, with Amaryllis demanding to know when the hell Sage had time to get a haircut while the school was burning down. Snapdragon compliments her on it though, but I think Sage could wear a burlap sack and Snapdragon would think it was the cutest outfit ever. Sage in turn compliments Snap on her newly painted nails, and manages to do so without having an anxiety attack this time. Amaryllis drags Snapdragon away before she gets caught up in more awkward flirting, and the two best characters in the show depart, never to be seen again. Thank you for your service, Amaryllis and Snapdragon. I genuinely would not have made it through this show if it wasn't for you two bringing a level of likability to this debacle. Anyway, Rosemary finally decides on the name High Guardian Spice for the group.
Because of our names.
You're all named after herbs, not spices. And with a brief leitmotif of Scarborough Fair, we get our final credit sequence, complete with a montage of art, which is a lot nicer than anything in the show itself, leading me to further believe the show would have been 1,000 times better if it had just decided to be a slice-of-life comedy and forgot about the larger arcing narrative. Especially since, if the internet is to be believed, when Rodriguez pitched the show to different networks, he didn't even have a story attached to it. He just went to various places like Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon and said, "Hey, these are my OCs, can I make a show about them?" And got rejected multiple times until Crunchyroll saw the opportunity to win social awareness points on the internet with their marketing scheme of highlighting the show creators' genders and sexual identities before anything of the show itself was finished to show off. Oh, and then there's an after credit sequence where Mandrake is brought before the tribunal, who all wear sunglasses and who are being led by Rosemary's mom.
The end!
And that's it. That's the entire show. Yeah, I didn't like it. It's not the worst cartoon I've ever seen in my life, and when it's all said and done, I don't think the show is actively harmful to anyone. But mostly because the handful of genuinely hateful moments it does on purpose, like the treatment of Aster, is so on the nose and ridiculous in how blatant it is that you can't even take it seriously. However, as a piece of animation, I find it incredibly insulting from a character and story level, and it makes me infuriated at how a dream project like this can be gifted and how it's been completely squandered for various accumulative reasons. However, I think there's a lot more to go into there than just something I can tack on to the end of an episode recap video. And so, although I would love to bury this here, please join me for one final video about High Guardian Spice, where I will talk about its writing and the larger creative application in greater detail. Like the video so the algorithm can cut me a break, subscribe if you wanna, and I'll see you next time when we put this beast to rest once and for all.
It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury. signifying nothing.